Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar on utilizing social media to engage and interact with your audience by Debbie Roos and Deborah Haliba. This is the second webinar in our Excellence in Organic Extension webinar series organized by Dr. Julie Grossman, Alan Meyer, and Gigi Suksan Guan of North Carolina State University. You can register for all the webinars in this series, as well as our upcoming organic farming and research webinars on the eOrganic website at extension.org/organic_production. We are very excited to have Debbie Roos and Deborah Haliba as our speakers today. Debbie Roos has been an agriculture agent with North Carolina Cooperative Extension for more than 14 years, and she works primarily with small-scale organic farmers in Chatham County. Her Growing Small Farms website features over 500 pages of photos and information helpful to organic growers around the southern region and beyond. Deborah Haliba is the Vermont State SARE Coordinator at the University of Vermont Extension, where she is currently conducting a training program on social media tools for extension educators in northern New England. She may also be familiar to some of you as the coordinator of the eOrganic Dairy Team. So Deb, I'm going to hand the presentation over to you.
Great, thank you, Alice. So we're going to just dive right in here. There we go. So here's what we're hoping to talk about today. First, just talk a little bit about social media and how and where they fit in with farmer outreach and education. And then next, I want to share 7 lessons that I've learned as I've explored social media over these last couple of years. And then I'm excited to see Debbie, who will give a tour of some of the social media tools that she is using. And then we'll have some time, as Alice said, for question and answer. And I just wanted to let folks know that although we'll be focused on Facebook, Pinterest, and Twitter, primarily for this webinar, between Debbie and I, we both have experience in all of these other social media tools, Google+, GoToMeetings, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So if you have questions, we can hopefully address those questions as well. So to get us sort of moving along a little bit, I just wanted to give some acknowledgements and maybe disclaimers as well, in that neither Debbie and I are information technologists. So we haven't had any formal study in this area. So we've basically learned these tools by attending sessions like the one today that we're here on, and by trial and error. So I just thought it would be helpful for folks to get some resources on how I learned about social media. Probably about 6 years ago, when I first started working for part-time for eOrganic, I was exposed to eExtension and their Learn campus, and that's a really great place to learn about social media. They have lots of trainings for free for extension educators like yourself. They also have annual conferences, and sometimes they stream those live, which is really, really great. And there's also a community of practice that eExtension has called Network Literacy, so they're also a really great resource. I also had the opportunity to learn internally at our university. We have a Center for Teaching and Learning that teaches online education, so that was a great source of information as well. And through our SARE work, as Alice mentioned, I'm facilitating a multi-year training project for extension educators in northern New England, looking at using social media in their sustainable agriculture work. So through that work, we connected with this group called Nonprofit Tech for Good. They offer webinars for a fee, focused on nonprofits, but it's been a really great experience for us to learn from the experts. There's other social media experts out there like Beth Cantor and Idealware. Those are all good references as well, but this was Heather Mansfield, who operates Nonprofit Tech for Good, a particularly good one for us. So in preparing for this talk, I made a couple of assumptions. about you. So I'm assuming that you think that social media might have a place in your programming with farmers. I'm assuming that you are currently working with or are interested in working with organic farmers, and I'm also thinking that you might know a little or a lot about social media already. You know, we have a farmer here in Vermont that we work with pretty closely, and he has a quote about assuming. Basically, that when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. But I just wanted to make these assumptions because I didn't really want to dwell on things like what is social media, sort of going in at length about the definition, or I didn't really want to talk at length about why you should be involved in using social media. I'm assuming that you already have an interest in doing so. So we know that social media is a means of communication for today, right? So it's becoming a popular communication tool. Here we go. And we know as more people are adopting the internet, using the internet over time in a very quick fashion, we also know that they are using social media and or social networking services. So this is just a graph that the Pew Research Center puts up. It's very helpful. So 72% of online adults are using social networking sites. And of those, Facebook is sort of the king daddy of social media, social networking sites, I should say. I thought this slide was particularly interesting for folks that might be looking to reach new audiences, particularly if those audiences might be women or people of color. It sort of shows who's getting onto these social networking sites. We also know that farmers are using social media. There's not a whole lot of research out there that informs our knowledge, but I do know that from the USDA, there's a computer usage survey that goes out to farmers every year. So we do know that farmers are using the internet, increasingly using it. There was a study published through the Journal of Extension in 2011, Gunther and Swan, who surveyed their farmers in Idaho, and they found that 70% of those farmers are on Facebook and 90% are using YouTube. So that's just a little bit of information that we have to inform who's using. Farm Bureau did a study in 2011 and found that 76 are using Facebook. So that's good that younger folks are using social media. Okay, organic farmers. Again, we don't necessarily have the data to suggest organic farmers' social media use, but we do know from a 2004 study conducted by the Organic Farming Research Foundation that 78% of the organic farmers they surveyed have internet access. This was an old study in the sort of the lifetime of social media, 2004, 9 years ago. So I decided that I would just take a quick look at some of our Vermont farmers, and so Friday afternoon I did a little informal scan of a listing of Vermont vegetable and berry farms that are Extension Fruit and Veggie Specialist maintains, just to sort of see. So this is not a scientific study in any means, but just a quick scan sort of showed that 43% are using at least one social media tool on their farms. About a quarter of them aren't using any social media that I could find in my quick scan, but 22% were using at least 2 tools, and 8% were using multiple. Usually those folks are highly engaged and are using like 3, 4, 5. So in terms of what tools they're using, Facebook, again, is the number one, followed by blogs. Some farmers are using blogs as their website, as their primary web presence, which was sort of interesting. And Twitter was also something that folks are using more and more. And these farmers are using these tools mostly in sort of reaching out to their customers. So how can we adapt or add to our current outreach and education programs to include social media? So I thought at this point we could maybe take a step back, and you could maybe type into the question box how you are currently providing your outreach and education to farmers. So how do you provide outreach and education to your organic farmers at the moment? Maybe if we can take a few minutes just to type that stuff in. Alice will read the responses.
Deb, can you hear me? This is Alice. I'm just reading a few of these. We have some comments. Conferences, research, blog, and Twitter, Facebook, Twitter, blog. One person said they're not engaging. One person said CCOF uses Pinterest, Facebook, and webinar, mostly by email, Facebook, blog, sometimes Twitter, webinars, emails, blogs, newsletters, just started a Facebook page, workshops, field day, and social media, tours on a regular basis, web, Craigslist, letter to CSA members each week. Let's see, that's a longer answer here. Discuss unusual vegetables and how to prepare with this newsletter. Not doing this yet. This is for the future. Integrating weather information and events calendar into our web page. Educational videos are posted via YouTube and Vimeo on our website, and we now have a new Facebook page which will promote workshops, case studies. Personal contact, field days, Facebook, Twitter, newsletters, and a website. Promoting a farmer's market, Facebook group, and field days.
Great. Well, thank you, Alice. Yeah. That's great to hear that you're already using social media in your current work. That's very exciting. So I was thinking that maybe I could talk about ways to adapt, or think about ways that we can adapt our traditional outreach and education activities to this new, quote-unquote, new technology using social media. So here's just some things that I found that folks are using. So, farm tours and field days, that seems to be, activities that we use a lot in our extension programming. Danielle Treadwell, who's an organic and sustainable ag vegetable production specialist from University of Florida, has started creating these virtual farm tours and field days. So she's using an embedded video on a website. So I thought that was pretty neat. Also, through eOrganic, we've worked with Washington State personnel to offer multimedia sites like Pachyderm, this site, that describes their integrated veggie project. So this combines video and websites and audio files into one little kind of pretty looking package. Another activity that I find we do a lot, of course, is demonstrations. So YouTube is a great way to provide those demonstrations in an online setting. 3 to 6 minute videos is no more than 6 minutes, I've been told, to provide video presentations on particular production practices can be really effective. One-on-one consultations. In the past, we've typically conducted our one-on-one consultations through office visits or phone calls or even email. But what about a Facebook chat or a Google Plus Hangout? Those are some ideas. I know of extension educators that do a lot of their consultation now through Facebook and have been pretty pleased with that. I conducted a video, or a Google Plus Hangout is what it's called, to do a consultation earlier this year, which was kind of fun. Someone had mentioned articles, newsletters. So social media, you could be publishing your articles through a blog, or e-newsletters are something that we've talked about in our training a lot. This one on the right here, the Champlain Valley Crops and Soils and Pasture team do an e-newsletter through Constant Contact, but there's lots of other programs out there that will help you do that. I know that we also offer conferences and workshops, and some of the social media efforts to support conferences are through Twitter. Some folks who are attending in-person conferences have a whole Twitter feed, so you can track the conference activities through Twitter. But this group called AgChat offers these evening sort of chats. It's usually scheduled on, I know it's not usually, it's scheduled on Tuesdays from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, and they pick a topic. They announce it the week before, and then they allow folks to type in. They have some leading questions that they ask. It's very interesting. So here's one up on the screen here that they talked about why farmers and ranchers are using social media. So I thought that would be particularly informative given the topic of this this webinar. This week the topic is agritourism, and they also had topics everything from humane raising of livestock to policy issues. So it's really kind of an interesting use of social media. And then even the White House is using these social media to hold conferences and workshops, especially when former Deputy Secretary, Ag Secretary Kathleen Merrigan was still in the Department of Agriculture. I was seeing lots of conferences and roundtables and meetings that she was sponsoring using Google Plus, like this this session on women leaders in local food and agriculture. She was also using some Facebook and Twitter, particularly when she was rolling out the Know Your Farmer initiative. So I thought that was kind of an interesting method to use social media. And then finally, embedding videos and weaving them together into a virtual workshop here. This is a workshop that I was involved with in my extension program for many years, for about 5 years, and then we were saying, well, why can't we not put this information that we travel around the state and the region into an online version. So this is our attempt here. So we have a workshop agenda with speakers, YouTube videos giving a speech, giving their presentations, and then we also provide take-home, quote-unquote, take-home resources that mirror the folder that you would get as an in-person session. So I guess I would say, that social media does not replace, our in-person events at all, and I'm not suggesting that they should, but I do think that they have tremendous potential to enhance our work, as well as expanding our reach and providing better connectivity to and among organic farmers. And as an example, this photo is a picture in my very messy office of an organic farmer. Jack has got about 30 years of experience with organic dairy and grains, and he was asked to give a talk at a New York farmer event, which was about 4 hours drive for him. Really was not keen on driving 4 hours each way for a 1-hour talk, so we were able to webinar him in to that talk, which worked out really, really well. Okay, so I'm just going to switch gears just a little bit and talk about 7 lessons that I've learned as I've sort of facilitated our social media training work through SARE. And some things I've learned, and especially as I've tried some of this stuff out. So, lesson number 1, have a social media plan. You really need to know where you're going with this stuff. So I always say to start with the end in mind and really have a goal. Who who are you focusing on, and to what end? Are you looking at education or outreach, promotion? And then how are you going to measure that? As an example, I have a Twitter account for my Vermont SARE work, and the goal for that is really just to provide our Vermonters about SARE and what it does, and general sustainable agriculture activities within the state. And what I chose as my social media output is to reach 300 Vermonters per year. The way I was planning to measure that is through my the number of followers, and hopefully to measure engagement through the number of retweets. And there's a couple of programs out there that will help you do that: Crowd Booster and 20 Feet and Clout. And then through Twitter, you can also, use like word searches to kind of investigate sentiment, how people are feeling about certain topics. So based on that goal, my social media plan, I've sort of been tracking my Twitter use over time. So, in 2009, it was very, in 2010, very, very modest. I did take a Twitter training in halfway through 2011 and implemented some of those techniques that I learned, and look at that. I was able to generate a bunch of more followers and hopefully more retweets and engagement as well. Okay. Lesson number 2 is focus on the content. So a couple of thoughts here. First, I think that sometimes we let the specific tool or tools bog us down or get in the way of our content. So I guess my advice would be, you want to go pick the tool, go where your people are. So you need to do a little bit of research on that. And we are educators, so our job is to provide education. Focusing on the content or using social media to bring your people over to your content, meaning a website, an e-newsletter, that type of thing. And then the other thing that I think about when I think about this slide is my mother is actually ringing in my head. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Well, the same is sort of true for social media. If you don't have something of interest to say, it's probably best not to post. I know that there were some advice out there that you should post, tweet, whatever, so many times per day or hour or such, but I think what I've learned is that if you're not saying something of interest, that people will sort of start turning you off. So it's best to sort of, when you have the content, to say it. Okay, make things concise. In my drive in this morning to work, I heard an interview with this fellow named Bo Burnham. He's a comedian who's in his 20s, and he got his start actually through YouTube. So as I was driving in, he had this quote that said, "How can I mind this frenetic mindset?" What he meant there is that people of his generation, folks in their 20s, he was suggesting that they get bored really easily and they need to be overstimulated. So I think what I sort of took from that interview is that we really need to keep things concise. And as he would say, there's really no room to coast, meaning you really have to engage people right away. So Twitter is a great way to practice that. You have 140 characters to get your message across, and it can be a really fun way to work on your hook. These slides over here are of YouTube videos. Now YouTube says that the first 15 seconds of any kind of video are key to engagement, and you can kind of see that maybe after 15, you kind of see this is audience retention, that you do sort of lose people. This is one of our eOrganic dairy videos, and it was sort of interesting to see this little dip right here. Well, I realized that our introduction to our YouTube videos are about 30 seconds long. So it makes sense that people are kind of tuning out until they get to the content, which is right about here. So that is good news, and we are thinking about ways that we can improve our dairy videos to maybe not have that long branding at the beginning, maybe put it at the end or on the side or something like that. So we really need to engage people quickly, or we will likely lose their interest. My fourth lesson is, to have, maybe not choose a voice, but have an authentic voice. Social media by definition is social, so unlike sort of the old media, where sort of like voiceless, faceless media announcements, in social media it's really helpful to show your personality, to create those connections with your audience. So this is a picture of my daughter. I'm a mom, clearly, and my kids are a big part of my life, so I do like to include them carefully in my social media. Particularly, I like to add, I have a blog. I'm a guest blogger for the Women's Agricultural Network here at the University of Vermont. So I like to maybe show more of my sense of humor and maybe my kids and that social media tool. Whereas my Twitter tends to be more, information, time sensitive, information, announcements, that type of thing. But I guess my point here is, like, be the genuine you. Don't try to, pretend to be something that you're not, because folks pick up on that really quickly, and it's a turnoff. The number one thing I've learned through all of the social media trainings that I've gone to and personal experience is photos, photos, photos. We need to start, we need to utilize all those photos that most of us take at various events and post them with our educational content. Alice had mentioned that this webinar is part of a series, and last time Seth Wilner from the University of New Hampshire talked about effective adult education. One of the reasons that photos are really effective, first of all, social media is a visual media, so it makes sense to have photos. But he talked about how photos can increase memory, retention of information. So he had some quotes by a researcher named John Medina, who talked about if information is presented orally, people will generally remember that information, about 10% of that information. But that figure goes up to 65% if you add a picture. So I think that photos are really important for that, and also to draw. The other thing that Seth had mentioned during his webinar is that, I'm not sure if folks were on that webinar, but he talked about Sandy Bell's research on how emotions impact learning. So, and he talked about there are 6 core emotions, and you really want to evoke or trigger the joy and surprise emotions to help encourage learning. So I think that might be one of the reasons. This is just my theory, my working theory, is that the reason people really enjoy pictures of baby animals and baby humans is perhaps that they're evoking those emotions of joy and surprise. But definitely use photos whenever you can. And also a trick that works is using numbered lists as well. Some of the research I've looked at suggests that people love numbered lists. We see it all the time in blogging, and it really works well. Hopefully it's working here with my 7 lessons. Our brains like to make order out of our world, and numbered lists are one way that we can do that. Another lesson I've learned is really to collaborate and curate. We are all really busy people, and so any way that we can use team approaches for social media I think will help with sort of the time management. As I mentioned, I'm a guest blogger for our Women's Agricultural Network program, and it works out great for me and hopefully for them as well. It means that I don't have to blog every week. I'm assigned like every 8 weeks. I can get my content out there to a targeted list that I want to target and in a really easy way. I'm also part of our Extensions Northwest Crops and Soils team, where we maintain a Facebook page. So it's really nice to sort of share that load. Whoops. Sorry about that. There we go. And then curating content. I've been reading some information from a social media expert out of France. His name is Fred Cavaza, and he also writes for Forbes magazine. And he was saying that we're living within a social media ecosystem. And over the last 7 years, we've sort of seen 3 waves with social media. So our first wave was the publishing wave, where we're really seeing lots of blogs and activities that social media tools that we use to publish information. Our second wave was the social networking sites, the sharing wave, when we're using Facebook and Twitter. And he contends that we're now in the curating wave. So we're packaging content, adding value to our content, because there's so much stuff out there now that folks are really looking for ways to repackage and compile it for them. So I thought that was sort of an interesting way. So there's lots of sites that will help us curate. Pinterest and Quora are just a few. There's a lot of them out there now. And then my final lesson learned is you need to measure your work. Everyone, to my funders, to my administrators, are asking the question, the so what question, both in terms of outputs and outcomes. My administrators in particular are asking about return on investment. So it really helps us take a look at what our goals were and how we're meeting them through our social media efforts. So happily, a lot of the social media tools out there do have their internal analytics, like Facebook. This is a way that we can capture our outputs, who we're reaching. I'm just going to flash up a couple more because I'm kind of at my end of my time. So we can also kind of look at reach and engagement. So people who are not just looking at our content, but are starting to have a little bit more activity around it, clicking through, sharing, those types of things. We can learn about demographics. Who are the people that we're reaching? I thought this was an interesting slide about 2 YouTube channels that I've been involved with. One's our Northwest Crops and Soils team. So this YouTube channel tends to look at, have videos on grains and hops and forages, and it was interesting to see the sort of the demographics. 82% essentially of our viewers are male, and mostly in the 45 to 54-year-old segment, versus our farm succession videos, which 74 are women, and they tend to be, I'm just, again, assuming here, that are either moms and or daughters. So that's sort of interesting, and thinking about ways that we can customize or create content to serve both of those different audiences. To sort of get to the outcomes piece versus the outputs, there are some tools that you can use. Again, this is an internal tool to Facebook. It's a polling, and this is a poll that Brian Krug at University of New Hampshire conducted. And then we also, as another example, eOrganic, our Alice, conducts these evaluation surveys of people who view the webinar. So here we can really get to the outcomes, not only like who's viewing our webinars, but how, the so what question, how are they using the information that we're providing. And I think this this information is very key to our continued success, is really documenting outcomes. As part of my social media work through SARE, I was lucky to have Sarah Boffman. She's the e-extension evaluator, She gave a social media evaluation webinar for me, for us, our training project. So it's all on YouTube, so I encourage folks to sort of take a look at that if they're interested in evaluation. So I think that was all the things that I had, and I look forward to answering any questions during our Q&A session.
All right. Well, thanks, Deb. That was a great, great presentation. I wanted to start out. My main role today is to kind of give you some examples of what Deb's been talking about. And I wanted to start out by just mentioning my Growing Small Farms website, because that's one of the main reasons I use social media is to drive traffic to that website. I created this website in 2002 because I did a needs assessment, and that revealed that the majority of the farmers that I work with did use the internet for information. Of course, that was, you know, over 10 years ago, so that was not very common back then. But organic farmers, I found, especially these small-scale, direct market organic farmers, have always been big technology users. At least that's been my experience. So that's why I created the website. It's now, you know, a very large site. I really enjoy working on that. And I found that social media works really well to complement that website, and has certainly increased traffic to it. So the website is a static site. That's where I have my content, but I don't get any interaction with farmers or clients on the website. I see who's using it through, you know, the metrics that I see, but a number of visits, but I don't hear from anyone. So social media has really allowed me to interact with people, and I really enjoy that. So we're going to go through some of the major tools. We're going to be looking at Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Pinterest. I have to start out by saying that I was a latecomer to Facebook. I was adamantly against it. I guess probably because I felt like I spent enough time on the computer with such a big website. But I did offer several workshops for farmers, training them how to use Facebook, because I felt like for them, it gave them a web presence where many of them did not have one. So I would tell them from the beginning, here, you know, I'm happy to help you launch a Facebook page and help you learn how to use it correctly, but I'm not going to be on it. Well, it didn't take long, of course, before I got sucked into it. So then I had to make the decision of how I would be a Facebook user. I initially put up a business page, Growing Small Farms, which is the name I've given to my program, and then I deleted it. I've decided I didn't want to do Facebook as a business page. I wanted to use a personal profile. Now that's a very personal decision that people have to make. Fortunately, our extension administration here is fine with that. There's several reasons why I chose to use, you know, to be on Facebook as Debbie Roos as opposed to Growing Small Farms. You know, one of them is that I've created several other Facebook pages for other groups, other parts of my life. So I'm an administrator on several pages already. I didn't want another one. Also, with a personal page, it's much easier to interact with other users. You know, as a business page, you can't. There's just certain interactions you can't have with others, with individuals. And as Deb has talked about in her presentation, it's important in social media to show your personality and to show your voice. Certainly, you can do that with a personal page. I tell people, you know, about 80% of the posting that I do on my Facebook page is all about work, and 20% is my life. And I think people really enjoy that. They tell me that they do. They like seeing that I do have a life, even though I seem to work, you know, at most nights. But you know, you do have to be somewhat careful, of course, since you're posting as for your work. Obviously, you know, during election periods, I'm careful not to really say anything about candidates. Certainly can't use it for any kind of advocacy. You know, but you'll see some of my personality and my interests show through. And for me, it's usually, you know, I foster dogs, and you know, I'm always trying to help dogs find homes, that kind of thing, or just things that are unrelated to ag. But for the most part, by and large, all the postings are related to organic, sustainable agriculture and small farms. And of course, any posting I do that's not related to that is only done during off hours. You have to be careful. Let's see, so some of the disadvantages of using a personal profile, probably the primary one is that I don't get the advantage of using the analytics. I don't get that kind of data on a personal profile. So I have to be a little more careful about how, I evaluate the effectiveness of a Facebook page. Also, I've noticed I post a lot to my Facebook page. It's really great for kind of sharing my day, what I'm doing in my job that day, what's going on with farms. And I have found that as I post more and more, there I'm posting less, like pictures especially, to my website. So I'm trying to find a way right now to increase the efficiency of that without having to basically post things twice. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about that later too. How do I use my Facebook page? So a lot of different things that I do there. Often I'm telling people about a new section that I've added to my website. I'm visiting farms and diagnosing crop problems, so I'll alert people to that. And again, usually that's a series of pictures I've posted on my Growing Small Farms website, but I will make sure and post about it on the Facebook page and send them back to the website to look at the content. I regularly promote workshops that I'm doing for farmers and also events for other organizations that I partner with or that I just think would be interesting to my clientele. Help promote our local farmers markets and our local farms. I see a big part of my job is helping to increase agricultural literacy in our community. So I think I know people really enjoy seeing snapshots of what's going on at a farm that day. They may not have access to that farm, but if I can help show them and share, a harvest day, or we have an organic farm in our county now that's harvesting rice. It's really the only rice production happening in our state that's for sale, but it's a tiny scale, but very interesting to people, and I can share that with people. Also, of course, traditional one-on-one consultation that happens a lot through Facebook. Whether through private messaging or people just posting right on your timeline. You get a lot of that. It's also a great way to get feedback. I even posted some questions over the weekend asking for feedback from people so that I could prepare for this talk. And of course, it's instantaneous. And so it's really nice for that. It's a great way, to post and share not only my content, but things that other people have done, so my peers. And also, as Deb, I just want to stress the importance of using photos. It is a visual medium, and certainly when you post a photo, that's going to elicit the most response from people. Much more interesting than just having text up there, and we'll see some examples of that. So some of the positives, I'm going to talk about some of the positives and negatives about Facebook, because of course, as with anything, there are both. It's definitely raised awareness of the work that I do to people that I, was not currently in contact with. So, over my 14 years in Extension, I've, built up a good list of people, and they get regular announcements about my programs. But the Facebook, what I found is with Facebook, most of those people, a lot of them are not on my email list, so they wouldn't know what was going on unless I posted it to social media. So that has helped. It certainly has increased the visibility and traffic to my website. I've certainly garnered new clients coming to programs, from the work that, we post on Facebook. It's also very effective at promoting our farms and events and farmers markets. And then also it's very fun. It's, I enjoy it. It certainly helped me feel more connected to people, even people that I see regularly, but also, of course, people I don't see regularly. You feel like you are, you know what's going on in their lives. And most of the farmers that I work with are on Facebook. Let's see. Some of the negatives. So because, I've got Facebook friends from around the world, and so that means you get questions and comments from around the world. And the thing is, I already got this with my website because it's so big. Anyone around the world can look at it. And I was already fielding, questions occasionally from internationally, India and whatnot. So, but that can be a negative. Also, because it functions 24 hours a day, people, when they post on your Facebook page, they, especially if they can see that you're actually on Facebook. I mean, the latest example was this weekend. Saturday night, I worked all day Saturday. We had a big farmers market event. And, I was posting some pictures Saturday night. And so somebody sends me a message, behind the scenes with a question. I'm like, okay, well, that's an easy question. I'll go ahead and answer it. But then, of course, when you answer them, they come back with about 3 or 4 more. And I was like, wait a minute. I just asked them flat out, right? I said, it's Saturday night. Please email me next week. So, you do have to set boundaries. That's your role to do that. People will, they expect you to be available. Just keep that in mind. But people definitely respect boundaries, I've found. When you explain to them that it is the weekend and you do deserve a day off, and they totally get that. Also, one of the things I don't like about Facebook, of course, is it's really only for current events for the most part. Sure, you can scroll down through your timeline if you want to see something someone posted a few weeks ago. Depends on how often they post. But it's really hard to find those things. There's no way to search for it. Now, photos are a little different. You've got photo albums, and those are easier to look at. But it's hard to, it's kind of really for what's going on right now. And, of course, as we've alluded to, it can be a time suck, so you have to be aware of that. It can be addictive. You've got to just be mindful and place limits, your own limits on how you use it and when you use it. Evaluating these social media tools can be a challenge. It's something I definitely want to be better at, and because, as I've already mentioned, I use a personal page, I'm not able to take advantage of the Facebook analytics. I do, however, do an online survey for my website every year. Usually we get 300 or so responses, so it's a good response. I always include questions about social media, and so I've gotten about the impacts of it. And these are just some of the comments recently that we've gotten. And so this is showing you that some people the people I work with prefer Facebook to the website. It just gives them a more immediate reminder of things that are going on in the community. And I like this as well. I mean, it's absolutely true. As I mentioned already, you feel more connected to people when you've been hearing and seeing your Facebook feed go by, and you know what people are up to, even people that you're not seeing. You definitely feel more connected to them, and they also feel more connected to you because they know a little bit about what's going on in your personal life, And again, it's just a little bit of that, but that helps them feel that you're approachable, and I think that's important. So, immediate impact, people saying that they started a pollinator garden based on the photos that they see me post regularly, and the information that I have on my website. So, I feel real good that it's had a positive impact. Like I said, I'm still working out issues on how to measure that. So that is something we'll continue working on. Twitter. Let's talk about Twitter. Looks like Deb and I joined Twitter about the same time. I seem to have this pattern because I also dragged my feet on joining Twitter. I guess I'm a initial reluctant user for all these social media tools, but in the end I end up liking them. I used to be much more active on Twitter, but once I got on Facebook, which was about a year later, my activity on Twitter started going down a little bit. The main way that I use Twitter is to learn new information. Most of my farmers are not on Twitter. My peers are, so other educators, nonprofits, organizations that I work with. So I've kind of given up right now on trying to convince farmers to use it because I don't think it's the best use of their time, but it's good for me because I learn a lot of things through Twitter that I can then share, on using other tools. So I do like it for that. But my number of followers is kind of plateaued, and a lot of that is because my activity has declined a little bit, and I'm not actively trying to follow other people and keep up with that. So I'm actually having a renewed interest in Twitter again. So we'll see where that goes. When we look at some of the tools up close, I'll show you some of these. But when you get a lot of followers, there's no way you can read all those posts, of course. So I use the list feature. I rely on that, and that helps me, keep up with just the handful of people that I really am interested in following and who are most relevant to me. Just like with the other tools, don't forget that you can still use photos on Twitter. You know, most of my tweets do not have photos attached, but I do enjoy adding photos. Also, it's not as organic interacting with people on Twitter for me as it is on Facebook. You certainly can do it, and we talked about the chat features, and I enjoy that. And we have a big Sustainable Ag conference every year, and I do like seeing the hashtags, and you know, you can have conversations with conference participants that way. You know, but a lot of times what you end up doing is more broadcasting, and that means just one-way communication. And of course, that's no longer social media. So you've got to, you know, I kind of try to watch that and make sure I'm responding to people and acknowledging people and engaging people. It's just not as easy to do it for me on Twitter as it is on Facebook. YouTube, I'm sure most of y'all are very familiar with YouTube. I am actually not yet a YouTube, you know, content creator. I am a photographer, so I'm learning video, and so I do hope to become very active in that. But I know, you know, you don't even have to be a videographer, of course, to be on YouTube. You can curate content and have, you know, put that on your channel. But I do know for a fact, of course, that a lot of the farmers I work with rely on YouTube for, especially for how-to videos. And you know, that was a recent just asking over the weekend. What kind of videos do you find most useful for helping you on your organic farm? And it was very specific stuff, which makes sense. You know, I've got a peach grower in my county, and I've been helping them with pruning, and that, you know, I found out they had learned, you know, some initial basic pruning techniques from watching our NC State fruit tree specialist, who has a video on YouTube about how to prune young peach trees. So that kind of thing is very useful, very specific, short little videos. I totally agree with Deb, 3 to 6 minutes maximum. When I see a video that's like 30 minutes, I'm like, ugh, I don't think so. It really depends on what it is. But 3 to 6 minutes is the sweet spot. Pinterest. Now, this is something, again, kicking and screaming for me. I was like, no, 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 not going to do Pinterest. I mean, you can't do everything. We have limited time. I'll tell you that what convinced me is I kept hearing over and over, it is the #1 referral site. And so that means that, you know, when people find your website, they're finding it through a site like Pinterest. And so I've had a personal Pinterest page for about a year now and just kind of been dabbling in it. That was my way to decide if I liked it, to decide if it was going to be useful to me. And I do like it. I'm happy with myself that I didn't totally get obsessed with it, because I think it's easy to become obsessed with Pinterest. But I used it, I found it very valuable, useful to me, to kind of a nice organizational tool to organize bookmarks that I like, and that's how I've been using it. So just last night I created my Growing Small Farms Pinterest page, and I'll show it to you. So I'm really going to get into that, but I'm still trying to figure out how can I use Pinterest as an organic agriculture extension agent. I think for me, because certainly most of the farmers I work with are not on Pinterest, but I do also work with gardeners. I do a lot of work with pollinator conservation and beekeeping, and that's where I think a lot of that audience is on Pinterest, especially the women. The majority of Pinterest users are women. I believe there's like 70 million people on Pinterest currently. So I think it'll be good for that audience. It's very specific, and I think it's going to be growing, and so I don't want to be left behind on that one. I want to make sure I know how to use it, and you know, we'll see if organic farmers start using it more. So I have had to rethink the way I do some of my website. I do all the web work myself, and you know, certain sections don't have photos, like when I'm posting web resources, and it's just a series of links on that page for a certain topic. Well, you can't pin that page. If there's no picture on it, you can't pin it. So it's made me rethink, the way I create pages, if I want to be able to use that on Pinterest. So I've redone some of that. So we're just going to quickly now look at a few examples. So I'm just going to start out by showing you, this is my Growing Small Farms website. I'm not going to show you around. I'm just going to, whoops. Okay, can everybody see that, I hope? Alice, is that visible?
Yeah, we see it.
Okay, just making sure. So when y'all have time, you can look through here. It's a really large site. It's got news features, events and whatnot. So I just want to, so again, the main reason I'm using my social media, not the main reason, because I like interacting with people, but one of my goals is to increase people looking at that. Now, Facebook. So I wanted to show you a few things about Facebook, just ways that I use it. Now, one thing is I'm not sure how to scroll. There we go. Okay, because I can't see my scroll bar over here. So you can get an example of things that I've posted today. Here, for example, I'm posting an event for a sister organization, a workshop. This morning I posted an event. We're doing an on-farm pepper production workshop for organic growers. So I'm posting about that. I'm sending them back to my website where they can have a detailed agenda and registration information, that kind of thing. I'm also doing a garden tour this Wednesday of my pollinator garden, so that's on there. Here's where I'm asking, some feedback from people. Here's a question from someone. They want to know if this is a cool plant to plant for bees. This little Lespedeza that they saw, so they want to, they ask me there. Sometimes I get questions privately, sometimes publicly. I wanted to, okay, so one more thing, like for this weekend. Okay, so here's a personal thing, an article about dogs, research on dogs. So that's, over the weekend, something personal that I would post that shows part of my interest. So this is what I did Saturday. We had a native plant sale at our local farmers market. So, I post a series of pictures I took there. You can see about 30 people like it. It generates a lot of comments. It generates interest in the farmers market, that kind of thing. So let's see. I can't figure out how to get to scroll up. Let's go that way. Okay. Just show you some example of how we use photos here. So look at the photo. Whoops, sorry, that's not what I meant to do. Photo. Look at the albums. So I'm just trying to show you all examples of photos here. The timeline photos can be anything from, again, this is a lot of what I'm using this for is raising awareness of what's happening in our local farming, beekeeping community. So here's, and I'm not opening these up, so of course y'all realize these are cropped pictures. Local beekeepers bottling their honey for the state fair. We did a farm tour last week, so this is a few of the stops, a vineyard, forestry, greenhouse, farmers market, dairy show, youth dairy shows, local artichoke production, lots of pollinator stuff. Here's a local farm. Here's our rice farm. I'm just showing y'all very quickly, I realize, examples. Here's a recent cover crop workshop we did with a farmer. Meals that I may cook, from farmers market food, and it gives exposure to those farms because I make sure and mention all the farm names, that kind of thing. Okay. Let's see. Back. Yeah, so that was just an example of that. And then other photo albums. So, you've got Pawpaw Festival. We have the state's largest pawpaw orchard, so I'm showing pictures here of local chefs coming out to harvest pawpaws and what they're going to do with the fruit. Photo albums from the farmers markets, that kind of thing. So that just gives you an idea. Here's a butchery and charcuterie workshop that we did, or that Cephs did, excuse me. Colleagues down in western North Carolina, the Gaia herbs and mountain horticultural crops. You get the idea. Okay, so I just want to kind of show you all a few things there. Now, Twitter, let's look at Twitter. Okay, so I think the survey showed that about 30% of y'all were on Twitter. Does that sound about right? So just very quickly, for those of y'all that are not familiar with it, so this is my Twitter page here. Similar to Facebook, the home page, of course, would show your Twitter feed. So that's the feed from all the people that you follow. And then here is what I'm posting. So you can see, Deb and I were chatting this morning, talking to each other. We're looking forward to the webinar. I'm highlighting events, talking about that, interesting stuff from Marla Spivak about, bees and disappearance of honeybees. Some of these are retweets, so sometimes I'm retweeting something someone else did. Some of it's my own. You see some interactions here, that kind of thing. The Nature Journal publishes an issue on agriculture and drought. I do try to use photos on Twitter, not as much as probably I should because I use so many photos elsewhere. I need to be better about Twitter. This is a NC State graduate vegetable production class coming to tour the pollinator garden and visit a local co-op, that kind of thing. Okay, let's see anything else on Twitter I wanted to show you. Oh, okay. So I want to show you one more thing about how. So what I really like is the use of these lists. So you can create lists in Twitter, and most of them are public. And honestly, I have not updated most of these in eons. I do keep this one I call Top Sites updated, and it is a private list. And these are just the people that I really want to hear what they have to say. There's no way I can keep up with everybody else. So I'm constantly adding to this. You know, these are people I don't want to miss because they often have something I want to retweet, or I'm really going to learn something important. So that, you know, make sure and look at that list feature and use that when you feel overwhelmed. And I totally agree again with Deb. We're totally in sync. Don't post just to post. I've certainly unfollowed people that post too often. You really need to have something important to say. You know, a lot of times when I'm talking to people about social media, and they'll go, I don't want to know what what somebody had for breakfast. I'm like, well, I don't either. That's the people that I'm, following, and they're not posting what they had for breakfast. So people just have this, I guess, outdated concept of what social media is. Surely some people are posting what they had for breakfast, but that's not how we're going to be using it, how we're going to be using social media. So I may go days without sending a tweet, or there may be a day when I send 3 or 4. Okay? Okay, so I'm trying to get back to, oh boy. Oh, I know what it is. I got to go back this way. That's what it is. I'm sorry. So I'm not really going to go look at YouTube because we're going to run a little short on time. I think everyone is familiar with YouTube. I was just pointing you have this link if you want to look at eOrganic on YouTube. Okay, so Pinterest. We're switching gears a little bit now to Pinterest. Remember, I just created this site last night. This is just the bare bones to get something up, but I just wanted to show you how I'm hoping to use Pinterest. This is not my personal page. This is my Growing Small Farms. So, for example, pest management. I did a board on sustainable pest management, and every one of these is a page from my website. So I'm trying to remind people and inform people that there is information on this website about, a whole series of photos, on vegetable crop. I don't want to, we're going to run out of time, but you can look at it. I have a bunch of photos of all the vegetable and cut flower pests. I've got photos of beneficials. I've got a really awesome list of web resources on this. So that's kind of letting people know that. Same with the pollinator garden. I've got great resources on my website, on all of those things. Okay. Let's see. So let's go back to this. Organic Farming Research Foundation. So they're also on Pinterest. I'm not seeing a whole lot of organic stuff on Pinterest, but I'm just starting to really look around. So, for example, this board on organic farmers. One thing I would say on this one, because they've got a lot of stuff that I'm interested in looking at, but make sure and use your description on your pin. For example, why would I click on this one? There's nothing to tell me what it is. If you have nothing else to do, then you can click on it, but when I open it, it still doesn't tell me what this one is about. So if I'm in a hurry, which I usually am, running out of time, I like the ones that tell you what it's about. So definitely use those descriptions. Another example, they have a board called Organic Tips and Tricks. A lot of this, I'm definitely interested in looking through all this. Most of these do not appear to be extension. None of them are from extension. I don't know any that are research-based, so I might have to take a different take on that as an extension agent. I'd be more careful probably about posting stuff from gardening blogs and whatnot. But that just gives you an idea of what you can do. So then Atra has a nice, I really like the model that Atra's used because, of course, y'all know, probably most of y'all are familiar with the Atra website. They have a very large website. And I like the model that they've used on Pinterest. They have a combination of stuff that's both from their website and from other websites. And it's not really wanting to open. I'm sorry you can't see that. So we will just close some of these down. Okay, so you can look at that on your own time. Here's a nice one, Kathy Flanders. Got some great stuff on fire ants. The only thing I would say on this one is I don't know where she's from. I would like to know, what university, what state. Just put that in your profile. But there's a lot of stuff in here that I'm interested in looking at. And then the final one I just wanted to give as an example was the e-extension fire ant. So that's got a lot of good information there. So I just wanted to give you all a really quick tour of some of the tools and how I'm using them and how others are using them. And that's all I have if we want to open it up to questions.
So we do have quite a few questions coming in. So here we'll start here. When collaborating with others, how do you develop a social media policy to ensure a consistent voice? Either of you want to take that question?
Sure. This is Deb from Vermont. So I think consistent voice. So well, first of all, if you use, like, I gave an example of the guest blogger technique, so the team approach. So typically what we see there, I think there was 8 or 10 guest bloggers, and we each have our own individual voice. We all have a very sort of clear goal about what we want to do, which is, engage with the female farmer primarily audience. So I see there's a lot of similarities, and I know that my colleagues have also, I mentioned that I always include or try to include kid stuff. Usually it's like on blogs there's a little bit of artwork or something that help spice up the blog post. But I see my colleagues are also including things about balancing work and family as a farmer and an educator and a mom. So there are those types of threads. Harder to do on Facebook and or Twitter. Our Twitter site that I'm involved with that's collaborative mostly just have been, time-bound events, so it's pretty straightforward. I hope that answers the question.
I would just add, I do have a couple of Facebook pages that I do collaboratively. One is our Chatham County Cooperative Extension Facebook page, and there's a number of people that post to that, and it's very informal as to how we partner. We just sometimes we email each other to see who's going to post about this or who's going to respond to this. So it's pretty informal that way, but it's always seems to work out. I have another organization, a conservation organization that I'm on the board with, and we do it the same way. It's often behind emails. We're emailing each other behind the scenes to talk about how to address a certain thing that comes up, and we always coordinate who's going to post about this event or that.
Okay, we have 3 questions coming in about photos, and they're more or less pretty much the same question about privacy regulations, whether or not you need to have photo releases from all the folks for the photos that you post on different types of social media, and whether you get written consent from people who are in the photos that you post online. So that's basically all kind of the same question, so if you guys could both address that.
I've always asked verbal consent, so before I even take pictures, and I tell people, like, if I'm at a public event, and I'm taking pictures of kids, I'm very careful about that, but I always ask. We do not, in most cases, unless it's a formal 4-H event, like a dairy show, then they may be signing releases in general. But other than that, it's a verbal consent, and often the parents want me to send the pictures to them. They're very happy that we have it, and I don't ever put kids' last names on I'm not tagging them. Sometimes the parents will tag them when I post them on Facebook, but I would never do that. So it's just a picture, sometimes the kid's first name, sometimes no name, unless the parent wants to come in and tag them. I haven't had any problems doing it that way.
Yeah, same here. I think the big concern is with minors, and I don't post other people's kids, just my own. To their horror. And I think that another sort of issue going along with photos is sourcing, proper sourcing, because it's really easy in today's world through social media to grab someone else's photo. So really trying to give attribution or credit is really, really key. I know there's some universities who have faced legal litigation because of not getting proper permission.
And I get around that by only posting my pictures, unless it's from, something that's posted on a website already, and I'm just sharing the link to the website.
Okay, here's a question about if you don't have a website to direct people to, what are some of the ways that you can get folks to your Facebook or Pinterest pages?
Well, in that case, yeah, I mean, you certainly don't, I know I kept saying that over and over, it's a way to drive traffic, but you absolutely do not need a website to be active and productive on social media. But you do have to find out creative ways to get the word out, that you have a Facebook page. And but that happens pretty easily with Facebook. Once people start knowing about it, you can invite friends to like it, if you're going to do depends on if you're doing a business page or a personal page. But just as with anything, if you've got business cards, you want to put your Facebook page on there, the address, putting it in all your email announcements about workshops. I'm assuming we're talking about Facebook for work. So you have to market it just as you would anything. You can't just build it and hope people show up. Make sure and tell people about it at every opportunity.
And to add to that, I think that social media is one of the areas where sharing the love is really beneficial. So, trying to friend other colleagues, like-minded individuals, it really pays off in terms of that the sharing of the networks or the compounding networks really helps in those cases.
Agree.
Okay. So we had a couple questions about statistics. I know, Deb, you talked about some user analytics in your presentation. So the question is, where do we go to get statistics on users of social media? Also, okay, well, that's the first question. I don't want to combine them since they're two different ones.
So how do well, that is a challenge, and that was frankly a challenge when I was preparing my talk. I know that the USDA NASS prepared a survey on organic farmers, but guess what? The government shut down, so I couldn't see if they asked any questions about social media. So that's I don't know that people there's any big source of data where people are collecting that types of information. I could not find it, and maybe someone could type in if they've had success, but I've had to really kind of scour around and sort of make some, some assumptions or correlations to try to figure that type of information out.
And I've just used Google. I mean, last night I was looking up Pinterest, #1 referral site, and you have to always question the source when you're getting that kind of data, but usually Twitter or Pinterest or Facebook themselves are going to have the most accurate numbers, and you can find a lot of that, through just using Google.
Mm-hmm.
It's not survey data, but it's just the latest numbers on numbers of users and demographics and whatnot.
Right. Yeah, and the Pew Research Center has a lot of good those type of larger statistics. Who's using social networking sites, who's using cell phones to access the internet, those types of things. That's a really good site. But it's macro data, not specifically farmer data.
And if you're doing, when I mentioned that I do a web survey of my website every year, and I ask in the final question, how many of you are using a smartphone, a tablet, that kind of thing, and how do you have high-speed internet or dial-up? That that kind of information helps me when I'm developing tools, to keep up with how that's changing. And I should have tried to collect that information for y'all, but anyway, I do. Just ask that when you're doing surveys of, your workshops. That's a good opportunity. If you're already doing some kind of evaluation, go ahead and ask that question there.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, any kind of needs assessment that you're polling your constituency, it's a really good time to ask those questions.
Okay, we have a couple more questions, but I just wanted to mention there have been a couple questions about whether we can view the slides from this presentation and whether there will be a recording, and the answer to both of those is yes. And I'm now showing the link on the screen where you will be able to find those. You can find the slides right now, and the link to the recording will be available within the coming week. And you can also register and find out the schedule for the other webinars in this series and our upcoming organic farming webinars. Moving on to more questions. Facebook took the questions app off. We have just been typing our questions and answer choices and asking for responses in the comments.
Yeah, I was just noticing that that the group, okay, so Facebook has a couple of different. You can do your personal, you can do a group page, which is can be closed or open to the public, and then your pages, which is the public, your public face. So group page, you can still do the polling. I noticed that yes, pages does not allow you to do that, but you could, yeah, you could put in, you could ask just as a a post. You could include a a URL to SurveyMonkey or another like online surveying tool. So those are some ways that you could still gather that type of data.
Yeah, I just ask it right on the timeline whenever I have questions that I'm asking for feedback.
Okay. In regards to tenure and promotion, for those who are integrated into academic departments, how can you make a case for having social media sites count towards tenure?
Wow, that's a good question. I don't have that opportunity, so that's a hard question for me to answer. I would say first, you could think about collecting the data like you would for your in-person education and outreach. So how are you capturing that data for your P&T efforts? You could make the case, I think this is an evolving field, clearly, you could make the case that, if you're reporting on contact hours or, if you're looking at social media for promotion, number of people reached, that type of thing. Debbie, would you have anything to add to that?
Well, I mean, I guess, you could ask in a web survey, again, specific questions as I do with my website, and I'm going to start doing it with social media, and I give them a list of practices. What behavior, you're asking about behavioral changes as a result of following me on social media, and have them check all that apply, and that gives you some good information on that. That's been useful to me, and I guess our administrators have been happy with that. But we still don't have a formal way to evaluate our social media tools. That's something that's evolving, and we are waiting on guidance for that. So we're kind of trying to figure it out as we go. But that is a good question. That doesn't apply to me, but I think you can just be creative about just treating it as you would a workshop, and say, as a result of following me on Facebook, how has this helped? Has it increased your knowledge? Has it changed your behavior? And then give them specific examples.
That's an excellent idea. Yeah.
It depends on what you've been posting on. If you've been posting about cover crops or insect management, those are the kind of options you give them. Has it helped you with those areas? I've also always include questions about, on the consumer side, has it increased your awareness of local farms? Have you bought more local food? Have you spent more money at the local farmers market? Those kind of questions for impacts are important, and people are good about responding to those. That's been my experience. And then, of course, you always give them open-ended questions too, and they love to give you great feedback there.
Okay. What web page building programs do you use or recommend?
I use WordPress. I've used it all. When I got here, when I first built my website, I had to write code by hand because we did not have PCs. So I learned to write HTML code. Then I moved into Dreamweaver, and now we're using WordPress, which I really like. So my big website is done using WordPress. And I teach farmers how to use that too, and it's fairly user-friendly.
Yeah, many of those websites that I mentioned of Vermont farmers are using WordPress, and I ditto what Debbie said. I use Dreamweaver for my static pages, and we do have WordPress as well.
Okay, here's a question about how you select messages to target specific audiences using social media.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay.
How do you select specific messages?
Yeah, I guess
to target certain audiences.
Yeah, if the person wants to be a little more specific. Okay. Yeah, you can type in a little more specific information.
Maybe an example. Yeah.
Yeah, of what you would like to know from that.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
instead of, I mean, for Twitter anyway, I can try to maybe respond to that. So for Twitter, you know, I do a lot of event announcements, but I feel like, oh, you know, X workshop coming up this day, here's the link, is not very compelling. So I do try to find a hook, either what the, you know, the gist of the event's about, you know, or somehow kind of really sort of think about that hook. What would be, what would get people to click on that that particular. I don't know if that answers the question, but you know, just giving a little thought instead of just like announce, you know, date, title. You know, that doesn't really work so well, I don't think.
Yeah, and I guess I do that sometimes too. I'll say beekeepers, farmers, so I just give them a clue right up front. Who am I talking to? Who is this going to interest?
Yeah.
And you know, and then but like Deb says, try to be somewhat creative or maybe even a little bit clever on a good day about how you're going to announce something. But you know, there certainly are different audiences out there, and especially with Twitter, it's very good good for you to only have 140 characters. I think it's been good for anyone. It's going to make you a better writer, for one thing.
I agree. I agree. Yeah, and for Twitter too, I try not to be too corny. I mean, I go in that direction really easily, so I try not to be too, you know, too punny, you know, as it were.
Do you use any particular survey instruments when you collect feedback from your audiences?
We have a built-in one called Survey Builder at NC State. It's very similar to SurveyMonkey, but you know, it's an online survey builder. So, but that's specific to our university. But anything like SurveyMonkey, isn't that what it's called? I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
Those are also very good. I love them. Gosh, because it immediately makes little graphs and charts for you. I love it. But very user-friendly. You know.
Yeah, I have a SurveyMonkey account. So that's what I use. eOrganic uses what? Instant Survey, Alice?
Well, I used to use that, and now they switched to Qualtrics.
Qualtrics. So there's a lot of products out there, online survey products.
Definitely take advantage of those because they take a lot of the work for you. You know, they take away a lot of the work. They wrap it up, really summarize it very well.
Okay. I think we've got time for one last question here, and that's just about WordPress and whether you have problems inserting photos where you want them to appear.
WordPress can be WordPress can be very hinky sometimes. It's not perfect. It's not as I found Dreamweaver better in some ways. So you get by. You don't have 100% control. Things don't always show up where you want them, or you fix something and then it miraculously goes back to the way it was before, and you just can pull your hair out sometimes. But overall, it's a perfectly adequate tool. So, I mean, I usually center my photographs. I don't try to do any kind of text wraps or anything like that, because that's where you run into trouble.
Okay.
But if you look around my website, you'll see examples of how I use them. They're usually centered and then with a caption. And it makes it look like an old Polaroid image, which I've kind of become fond of that, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're running out of time, but I'd like to thank you for all your questions and mention once again that you will be able to find our many other recorded presentations, as well as this one, on organic farming and research topics with the link on your screen. Thank you so much, Debbie and Deb, for this presentation, and thanks to everyone for joining us.